This Sunday on Capital Connection, Governor Pritzker wants 4 more years.
I am running for re-election.
The first-term Democrat jumps into a new race, kickstarting the 2022 election cycle.
The vote for J.B. Pritzker has always been a vote to make a fairer tax system for the middle class.
Governor Pritzker sits down with us one-on-one to explain his bid for re-election and 3 Republicans running for a chance to challenge him in 2022. One of them joins us to respond.
We need federal bailouts to get in a better position. We're not on the right course.
He runs an asphalt and a paving company, and he's winning the fundraising race in the primary right now. Gary Rabine joins us. It's all coming up on Capital Connection.
From the Illinois State Capitol Rotunda, Capitol Bureau Chief Mark Maxwell is asking the tough questions. This is Capital Connection.
Welcome to Capital Connection. I'm Mark Maxwell, reporting from the Illinois State House on this Sunday, July 25th. It's official, he's running. Governor J.B. Pritzker announcing his plans to run for a second term earlier this week, launching a campaign that promotes his response to the pandemic.
We're ready to put the full weight of the state behind a full-fledged response.
This is coming. We're going to have to live with it for a while, so let's get ahead of this thing.
Republican candidates running for a chance to challenge Governor Pritzker hammered his use of coronavirus restrictions. Perhaps the loudest critic, State Senator Darren Bailey, who took the governor to court challenging his use of executive powers for its harmful effect on business. Governor Pritzker acknowledging some of those decisions during his campaign video.
When I ran for governor 4 years ago, I could not have imagined that I would end up leading the state through a global pandemic. Look, I may not have gotten every decision right, but at every step along the way, I followed the science and focused on protecting the lives and livelihoods of the people of Illinois.
We sat down with Governor Pritzker one-on-one when he lifted the last of those coronavirus restrictions and Illinois entered that fully reopened phase 5, to review many of those decisions of the past. But as he launched his new campaign for a second term in office, we sat down with him again and asked if he's seen those signs of downstate discontent, if perhaps that was one reason why he featured downstate so prominently in that video, and how or whether he would govern wielding those executive powers ever again in the future. I saw in your campaign video on Twitter a few days ago now that you really highlighted the leadership during the pandemic, during the coronavirus. And you also featured a lot of small downstate images, businesses. I wonder, during your travels downstate, did you ever see some of those yard signs? They say Pritzker sucks the life out of small businesses. There's a lot of that opposition downstate sort of growing, some of that sentiment. You seem to almost acknowledge that in an interview with Mike Flannery yesterday. You said, in retrospect now, I think what we would say is if you could have kept the capacity limit appropriate in a smaller venue, it might have kept that open. Is that an acknowledgement that some of your policies closed businesses or had that effect?
Mike asked me specifically about large retailers and why we opened large retailers and were asking small retailers to close. And the answer to that was because the Department of Homeland Security recommended that we maintain essential businesses in a stay-at-home order, that only essential businesses should stay open. And they had a specific list of what kinds of businesses qualified as essential businesses. So look, here's what I can tell you, that the loudest complainers about COVID-19 mitigations were the very people who wanted to do nothing about mitigations, and the people who were following the mitigations, the vast majority of the people in our state, they weren't the ones protesting with signs, even signs with pictures of Hitler on them. They were folks who were doing the right thing in their communities for their neighbors and keeping everybody safe and healthy. And so, look, I'm happy to talk to people downstate, and what they tell me is that they're very glad for the leadership that I provided in very difficult times for the state.
You've also suggested that some of those restrictions could come back, but all along you said that you were only using these emergency powers, the executive powers, because we didn't have a vaccine. We have one now. How can you go back and use executive power now that the vaccine, it seems whatever public health crisis we have in our future, is one of our own making as a people?
There's always something that we need to be monitoring about this pandemic, because as you've seen, that even though we have vaccines available, there is a good number of people in our population who are not yet vaccinated. They've either chosen not to get vaccinated or haven't had access to it for some reason, or that we need to make sure they get educated about it. What's important is to keep the people of Illinois healthy and safe, and that's making sure people get vaccinated, because 99% of the people who are dying from this virus right now are people who are unvaccinated. That's unacceptable to me that we're letting anybody die during this pandemic, and so I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we provide for people vaccines and to make sure that we're promoting people getting vaccinated.
But even in court, state lawyers were telling judges, we have to do this because we don't have a vaccine. How does the presence of the vaccine now, the wide, ready, availability of the vaccine, change your ability to enforce or enact statewide executive power to enforce those rules going forward? What's the line now?
My job is to keep people safe and healthy. That's been my job all along. Even before we had a pandemic, that's part of the job of being governor. So I'm going to continue to work on that. We're following the science here. What the science tells us is that the more people you have unvaccinated, the more likely it is that you'll have a variant that ultimately may break through the vaccines and unfortunately put people who are already vaccinated at risk. So the more people who get vaccinated, the better off we are as a state. The extent of my authority to do that, I can just tell you that I'm listening to the science, I'm listening to the doctors, to the medical professionals, as I have all along, and we'll do what we need to do to keep people safe. But right now, what we've said is we're monitoring the numbers. We'll only impose mitigations as we are absolutely in need of doing so in order to make sure that we're diverting this virus.
You've got that going on. You've also got the operations of state government. A review of state records and communications, best we can tell, about 15 out of 100 different various state agencies or departments could tell us that they are fully back to work in person. A few dozen of them are operating at some hybrid level, some in person, some at home. When will Illinois government be back up and running at 100%?
We are up and running at 100%. We've got 60% of people who are in the office today across state government. We've got a large number of people who are actually, as it turns out, more efficient doing some things at home.
So that could stay?
So some of those things will stay, yeah. We've got hotlines, for example, that operate at the Department of Human Services, the Department of Children and Family Services, that, as it turns out, are more efficient when people are operating at home and answering those calls and managing those calls. So that's just one example. But having said that, the rest of folks who are not in the office, we've been gradually bringing back, and you've seen that all summer, bringing people back to the office. That's what's happening in the private sector. That's what's happening in the public sector.
Still to come later this hour, one of the Republicans running for a chance to challenge Governor Pritzker joins us for his first interview on this program. But when we come back, more of this interview with Governor Pritzker.